Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, observe this mushroom that stands here before you. Yes, a mushroom that resembles a pine cone heading skyward, the mushroom that is laden with many craterous holes. Yes, for those that know, then you already know, but for those that don't know, then this is known as the morel, aka the Morchella, a spring-blooming wild fungus that is considered to be one of the best-tasting mushrooms in the entire world. Yes, indeed. Prized by gourmet chefs and a staple in many regional cuisines, the morels have earned themselves the reputation of being an absolutely top-tier wild edible. Expensive in the restaurants, but free out here. So, to the wild camper that's looking to cook up a storm around the campfire, then get ready to add morels to the menu. Now, here are the basics. For happy campers looking to get into the wild food game, then the morels make for a great target as they are so easy to identify. But before we can proceed, there are two things that you need to know about morels. Number one is that they are toxic when they are raw. So do not be hasty, they must first be cooked over the campfire before they can be safely eaten. And number two is that there are a couple of deadly toxic lookalikes to have to worry about. Now that is enough to deter the squeamish, but distinguishing between the edible morels and their deadly toxic lookalikes is a very simple process. So easy that even my dear old arthritic grandmother could do it. So now let's dive in right at the deep end and get to know this delicious edible delicacy. Shaped like a pine cone, they are covered in a spongy, porous labyrinth of deeply ridged holes and craterous pits. Overall, they somewhat resemble a delicious block of honeycomb. Pretty simple, right? But nay, for you see. The cap of this mushroom is polymorphic, meaning that its shape can vary between specimens. For example, one morel can be short and stumpy, while the other can be more slender and spear-shaped. And not only that, but between species they can also be found in a wide variety of colours, such as black, brown, grey, yellow and beige. Sounds a bit tricky, but regardless of colour or shape, there is one feature that remains constant, and that is the signature network of deeply pitted craters within the cap. However, it is not enough to know the morels by exterior appearance alone. Nay, for further identification, then you gotta get surgical. You gotta grab a blade and slice it in half lengthwise, because inside you should find an interior that is completely hollow. You will, son, yes indeed. From the tip of the cap to the bottom of the stem, it is completely hollow and empty. Nothing but air in there. And this right here is the single most important feature of positive morel identification. When you cut it open, it must be completely hollow. Like a bag of Walkers, you know, you think you're getting a full bag, but really, it's half a bag of fucking air. But to counteract the disappointment of getting less than you thought you would, then you can at least rest easy knowing that this completely hollow and empty interior is a sure sign of confirmation that what you got here is indeed a true morel. The name of the game is that if it ain't hollow, then don't swallow, because only true morels will have a hollow interior. The deadly toxic lookalikes do not have a hollow interior. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, there will be more on that in a moment. Now, another important feature of the morel to take note of is the stem. Notice how that the stem too is completely hollow, and also take note of how the stem is only attached to the bottom of the cap. It doesn't shoot straight up the middle like your average typical mushroom would. Nay, in the case of the morel, the cap and the stalk are all one piece, which overall lends to the formation of that perfectly hollow, sealed, walled cavity. A perfect inside outline, like a cast mould. If you could, hypothetically, pour some molten metal in there, then you would be able to make some rather irregularly shaped metal arrowheads. Right? You feel me? You feel me. And fun fact, a nickname of the morel is the dry land fish, which comes from how the morel looks when it is sliced in half like this. As you can see, at a stretch, you could say that its outline does indeed resemble that of a fish, bit of a stretch, but why not, eh? So a cap filled with craterous holes and a hollow interior cap and stem are the two main features to look out for when identifying morels. Now let's talk about edibility, how they taste and how to cook them up around the campfire. Morels, when cooked, have a meaty texture and an earthy hazelnut taste, kinda like Nutella, but without the chocolate. It is a hearty flavour that is unique and delicious, especially when you consider that these are things that you can find growing out of the ground in the middle of the woods. So with all things considered, they taste absolutely amazing. It's a real 10 out of 10 would bang. But settle your tea kettle there just a minute, my good son, as I must emphasise that morels must be cooked first before they can be safely eaten, as they are toxic in their raw form, possessing the somewhat potent toxin known as hydrazine. Yes indeed, that may sound familiar to some of you, as hydrazine is a well-known primary component in rocket fuel. You what, son? Yes indeed. Come again, a mushroom that contains rocket fuel? Well, that sounds pretty badass. Well yes, you're quite right, but it's definitely not something you would want to consume, as side effects of hydrazine consumption include all of the usual suspects, such as nausea, vomiting, uncontrollable shaking and spasms, convulsions, you know, all of that kind of fun stuff. But fear not, my son, as this toxic hydrazine can be quite easily destroyed with just a little bit of heat. So cooking them up around the campfire will destroy all of those undesirable toxins, making the morels completely safe to eat. Now, the usual recommended method behind cooking morels is to take them home and cook them thoroughly, you know, bust the frying pan and then saute that shit. But out here in the wild, you can't do that, so you gotta be a little bit more daring and a little bit more adventurous. You have two viable options. Number one is to skewer them onto a stick and then roast them over the fire, or number two is to drop them into a pot of boiling water for 2 to 3 minutes. Either method will destroy the toxins, but boiling them has the additional benefit of washing out any grit or dirt granules that may be lurking within the many craters of the cap. If you wish to err on the side of caution and want to be as thorough as you possibly can, then combine both methods. Boil them up first and then finish them off by roasting them in the flames of the fire. It sounds like quite a lot for a little mushroom to go through, but when it comes to eating morels out in the wild, it is better to overcook them than to undercook them. Undercooking has poisonous consequences, whereas overcooking them does not. Overcooking does not mean burning or incinerating them, however, so there is absolutely no excuse for being a shoddy cook out here. And fun fact, the morels are so popular and so widely sought after across North America that every year there are annual morel hunting festivals. Yes, you heard me right, festivals. Oh yes indeed. As the morels arrive in the spring, the great morel hunt begins, with many people heading into the woodlands to participate in this special annual event of searching for those highly prized yet highly elusive edible morels, with the yields that they manage to bring back being either 1, taken home and eaten, 2, sold to the restaurants and markets for quite a pretty penny, I should add, or 3, entered into the competitions being held at these annual morel hunting festivals. Competition criteria including single largest specimen or overall largest yield. This phenomena of hunting for morels has been a long-standing tradition across North America since the 1950s, and has become so culturally significant in certain regions that in 1984 the morel mushroom was officially classified as the state mushroom of Minnesota, the first mushroom ever in existence to have ever achieved such an honor. So, you know, it's kind of a big deal. But with such a spotlight being shone upon its edibility, let us not forget that there are a couple of deadly toxic lookalikes out there. Two particular fungi, Gyromitra esculenta and Verpa bohemica, are collectively known as the false morels. Their physical characteristics are very similar to that of the true morel, so a case of mistaken identity is a real possibility. But if you know your morels well, then separating the true from the false is a very simple process. And so, here's the lowdown. Let us acquaint ourselves with these deceptive mimics. Gyromitra esculenta is an immediately eyebrow-raising imposter due to its cap colour alone. Typically found in shades of red, maroon, mahogany and sometimes even purple, this colour palette is one that a true morel will never possess. So that is fairly simple, but further observation of the cap also reveals an entirely different structure. These gyro false morels have a more brain-like and cerebral appearance, composed of multiple twisted veins, wrinkles and folds, rather than the cratered honeycomb appearance of the true morel, which is composed of a clearly defined set of holes, ridges and craters. But to really seal the deal, then you gotta get surgical again. Slice a gyro false morel in half and you will notice that it does not have a hollow interior. Not even close. Not only is the stem of the gyro false morel full and filled in, but it also travels directly up through the middle of the mushroom. It's not quite the completely hollow cast mold interior that you would find within a true morel, so telling these two apart is a really simple process. Remember, if it ain't hollow, then don't swallow. But things can get a little bit more tricky when it comes to the Verpa false morels. Being much more regular and structured in their overall appearance, the Verpa bohemicas are the true mesmers. From a distance, they look exactly like true morels. And plus, they are also capable of taking on the yellow or brown neutral earth tones of the morel. So colour palette and overall shape are definitely not the key distinguishable features with this one. This requires further inspection, so a closer look at the cap will again reveal a more cerebral structure, more wrinkles, veins and folds rather than holes, craters and pits. And this difference alone is subtle, but it's enough to make you recognise a Verpa from a morel. Morels do not have wrinkles, veins and folds. They have craters, holes and pits. But again, if you're in doubt, then you shouldn't rely on exterior appearance alone. Get surgical and slice it in half lengthwise. Inside of a Verpa bohemica, you will again reveal a non-hollow interior. Ha! What a relief. Much like the gyro, its stem will be full and filled in. And that stem will also be travelling up through the centre of the mushroom. Not hollow, not attached to the base of the cap, and not a cast mould. Based on these interior features alone, we can say with certainty that this is not a true morel. This is a toxic Verpa false morel. Those pesky Verpas, they are crafty motherfuckers, I say, and require special attention. So, let's play a game. It's called Edible Morel or Toxic Lookalike. Let's go. Kablam! Bam! What's all this then? A yellowish brown cap with no holes but wrinkles and veins? That's probably a Verpa, but inside you can see it has a full filled in stem that shoots right up through the centre of the cap. That is definitely a Verpa. Toxic, do not eat. Again, brown cap this time, wrinkles and veins, and a full stem that travels through to the top of the cap. That's another Verpa. Toxic, do not eat. Now, cutting up the mushrooms is the foolproof play, but it's not very eco-friendly to go around dissecting all the mushrooms just to determine whether or not it's an edible species. No, it's all a bit unnecessarily destructive, so it helps to get by with just cap ID alone, and that is quite doable. So let's continue. And how about this batch right here? They look a lot like morels indeed, but nope. Even though they have a brown conical cap, they do not have those honeycomb holes. Instead, they have veins and wrinkles. Close, my son, but no cigar. That's a batch of Verpas, toxic, do not eat. And how about this rather aesthetic yet gelatinous wrinkled cap? Well, again, it's all wrinkles and veins, no holes. That's a Verpa too. I think you get the idea. Now, how about this one? A messy, gloopy, red-coloured cap, looking more like a brain, just a gross mass of wrinkles and veins. Well, not a Verpa, not a morel, that's a gyro false morel. Toxic, do not eat. So although similar in concept, the false morels fall short on the finer details. The lack of truly pitted holes and a lack of interior hollow cavity are the two features that you need to look out for. Remember those two things and you'll be good to go. And that right there is advanced level morel identification. You know how to identify them inside and out, you know how to cook them, and you know how to tell them apart from their deadly toxic lookalikes. You, my son, are now well versed in the ways of the morel. So, all that's left to do now is to talk about how and where to find them. The natural habitats and growth habits of morels are a set of incredibly divisive and controversial issues, with every morel hunter having their own theory as to when and where a morel can be found. Beneath the shady pine tree or in amongst the damp, mossy ground, there are many a theory and many a ritual, but from a purely scientific perspective, it is well known that morels grow in association with certain types of trees. They are known to form symbiotic mycorrhizal relationships with the roots of aspen, pine, ash, elm, oak and sycamore trees, to name but a few. So beneath those particular trees, you may find a fruitful yield. But they can also be found in grassy fields, sandy soil, and upon southern-facing slopes, which doesn't really narrow things down. It's still a fairly large search radius, but there are definitely those several key targets to hit in order to improve your chances of success. But regardless of habitat, they are still notoriously difficult and elusive to spot, as their neutral earth tones do a great job of concealing them away in amongst the deadfall and debris. So, as the old saying goes, not a tree goes unchecked and not a leaf goes unturned. And that right there is all you need to know about morels. Essay over. But just one more pro tip, and that is that you must remember the golden rule of mushroom gathering. And the rule is not to pick them, pull them, or rip them out of the ground. Because if you do, then you also risk ripping out the mushroom's root system, its mycelium along with it. And without that, the mushroom will be unable to grow back. So instead, if you want to gather mushrooms, then you should cut them through the base of the stem. This way you leave the root system intact and the mushroom will be able to grow back. And that's Juju. Now, if you're out and about this time of year, then there is a lot more to look out for than just morels. Many edible plants also pop up this time of year as well, such as garlic mustard and the Thunderflower. Sounds interesting? So let's go have a gander. And yes, here it is, the garlic mustard plant, aka Jack by the Hedge or Alliaria petiolata. Now, passing by this plant, it really doesn't look like anything special. It's just a green plant with a few white flowers. But no, sir, you would be mistaken, absolutely gravely mistaken, my son, for you see, as this plant, at least in my opinion, is actually one of the better, most tasty wild edibles that you can find out here. It is truly a top tier cheeky nibble. And here's why. This plant produces edible leaves. Leaves which have a spicy, oniony, garlicky and mustardy taste to them. You are saying yes indeed. A bit more on the oniony side of things rather than the others, but nevertheless, that is a tasty set of leaves right there. It's quite uncommon to stumble across something that actually activates the old taste buds out here, so these delicious and spicy leaves are genuinely quite a wonderful thing to graze upon, and they would make a fine addition into anything you decide to cook up around the campfire. So it's definitely worth getting to know them. Let's talk ID. Very commonly found off the side of the trail or down by the riverbanks, it features a long, silky, smooth, hairless stalk and stem, heart-shaped serrated leaves, and little clusters of small white flowers, with each flower having 4 petals in the shape of a plus. From a distance, they look very similar to the dead nettle, as they share a similar leaf shape and similar cluster of white flowers, but the main difference between them is that the dead nettle is covered in trichomes, those spiky, bristly hairs, while garlic mustard is smooth and silky. Both garlic mustard and dead nettle can often be found growing in amongst each other, so case in point, do be aware of the differences. Now, garlic mustard, as an edible, is not just something that hikers have the occasional nibble upon. No sir, for you see, it is in fact one of Europe's oldest native spices, having been used in the past quite frequently as a spice and as a salad green. Evidence also also shows that British colonists took garlic mustard across the world as a staple part of their diet. So there is a long old history of this particular plant providing the nourishment. So if you want to chow down on this tasty little plant while also experiencing the best possible flavour, then you should favour the young fresh leaves near the top of the plant. As generally a rule of thumb is that the larger and older a leaf becomes, then the more bitter in taste it becomes. Therefore the young fresh leaves are always favoured if you want those gourmet style points. And plus, not only are the leaves edible, but the stems and the flowers are edible too, so all in all, that is quite a bountiful nibble. Now, just imagine fresh morels garnished with shredded garlic mustard leaves. Oh, that there, my son, is how you get the ladies salivating. That there, my son, is some campfire culinary genius. And that's a 10 out of 10, would smash into oblivion. But do remember to have a tic-tac afterwards. Yes, that's the pro tip right there. And now we're moving on. Now then, here's an odd one. This here is known as Cowslip, aka Primula veris, with a large rosette of broad crinkled leaves and large dense clusters of drooping yellow flowers that sit atop of a single stem. This here is another edible plant, but a fairly strange looking one. It kind of looks like its flowers have yet to bloom, but no, that is the full flower right there. Egg yolk yellow and small, much like a buttercup. It just has a disproportionately long stalk, which is shrouded in a bit of a sheath, so although it looks like it has yet to fully emerge, it is in fact fully mature. And the name cowslip is a strange one, but it's not cow's lip, it's cowslip, from the old English word cowslip, meaning cow shit, or cow dung, as this plant has been known to grow quite commonly out of cow dung. Fortunately, that is not the case today, as far as I know. Not really willing to inquire, but anyway, a few other nicknames include fairy cups, plum rocks, and titty pines. Why? Well, I have absolutely no idea. But take a look at those leaves. Don't they look familiar? That craggy, scaly, crinkled broad leaf? Oh, well, that looks exactly like a primrose leaf, I hear you say. And well, you would be correct, because this is indeed another species of primrose. And much like its woodland-dwelling counterpart, this too shares all the same tasty edible qualities. The large leaves, the stems, and the flower heads are completely safe to eat. But of course, it's always best to wash them in a pot of boiling water first, particularly when they have a reputation for growing out of cow dung. And chilling in the woodland, you may also find the Grape Hyacinth. Yes, resembling a grapevine and giving off those bluebell vibes, the bulbs of this plant, like little tiny onions or shallots I suppose, are said to be edible once they have been boiled for an hour in multiple changes of water, which is quite an involved process, so no thank you, Jeff. And plus, on top of that, hyacinths from all genera are believed to be the sacred flowers of the Greek god Apollo, a son of Zeus and god of various things such as god of music, god of healing, god of plague, god of archery, god of prophecy. You know, let's just say that desecrating the sacred plants of Apollo is probably not a good idea. Yes, not quite the cheeky nibbles that we're looking for, so we're gonna leave these sexy motherfuckers be and carry on with our merry search. Also common this time of year, particularly along the edge of the woodland, is this edible flower known as Stitchwort, aka Old Nick's ribs or Dead Man's bone. This plant has over 100 different nicknames. It seems as if every region in Britain has a different set of nicknames with different meanings behind them, but the one and only true scientific name is Stellaria holostea. Stellaria meaning star-like. And that is a very nice name for something to have. Shooting from those slender brittle stems is a brilliant snow-white flower, which, at first glance, appears to have 10 petals in 5 pairs of 2, but nay, that's just the mind games, you see. It's actually 5 petals. Each one is just deeply notched to give the illusion of many petals. That's the masquerade. It deceives us so, but anyway, these flowers, including the stem and the leaf, are edible, and surprisingly they taste a lot like lettuce. So that's very pleasant indeed. As far as wild edibles go, that's a solid 7 out of 10. But what does the name Stitchwort mean, I hear you say? Well, if a plant has the suffix of wort at the end of its name, then that usually implies that it had a historic use in folk medicine. And the word that comes before wart is usually what the plant was meant to treat. So in this case, stitches, the old pain in the side that you sometimes get while running or walking, I suppose. So, back in the day, a beverage made from water, stitchwort flowers and powdered acorns was the go-to tonic or drink of choice for messengers and runners, kind of like the old school version of Lucozade. Huh, how interesting. And the name Dead Man's Bone and Old Nick's Ribs refer to the brittle nature of this plant, for you see its stem is laughably weak, pitifully weak. Even a gentle gust of wind would be enough to completely blow it over and snap it in half. Said to be like the bones of an old man, brittle and prone to injury. And plus, its colour is bleached like old bones left out in the sun, and you could also say that overall it resembles a little bit of a rib cage. So that right there, that's why it's called Dead Man's Bone and Old Nick's Ribs. Bit of a stretch, but why not, eh? And now, as our camera battery's on the blink, we're gonna wrap this up quick fast with this here Thunderflower, aka the cuckoo flower, an edible plant that's fairly easy to identify. Found in the grassy areas amongst the daisies and the dandelions, it features a slender stem with a cluster of pale pink or white flower heads on top, with each flower having 4 petals, and each petal has noteworthy veins in a darker shade. Easy peasy. This is known as the cuckoo flower because its flowers bloom from March to June, and this tends to coincide with the arrival of the cuckoo bird, which migrates here into Britain during the spring. And the name Thunderflower comes from the old folklorish superstition that if you were to pick, damage or trample upon this plant, then you would trigger a thunderstorm. Oh my goodness, how disastrous, or at least that's what would happen in the English version of this superstition. For you see, in other regions of Europe, the story goes that not only would you summon a thunderstorm, but also you, or one of your family members, would actually be struck and be killed by the lightning. So there is a varying range of consequences across the board. Tasty edible plant or potential death? Definitely something to consider. And fun fact, just as the morel is the state mushroom of Minnesota, the cuckoo flower is the county flower of Cheshire. So yes, we've had a few celebrities in our midst today. Mushrooms that contain rocket fuel and flowers that can trigger thunderstorms. Oh, now that right there sounds like a pretty interesting day to me. And well, that is all for now. Just a few cheeky finds that I wanted to share with you, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you round, bros. Peace!